now you've built these great companies that physically, the physics of them are enormously successful. So successful, arguably, that you have leverage over everybody else, right? Nobody else can do Starlink. Nobody else can get nobody else can get the rockets in space yet. Amazon and Jeff Bezos are trying, but they haven't yet.
I hope he does.
You hope he does?
Yeah. I mean, I think, but I actually agree with a lot of Jeff's motivations. I mean, I think, he's, and so let me put it this way. If there was a button I could press that would delete Blue Origin, I wouldn't press it. So I think it's good that he's spending money on making rockets too. I suggest perhaps he spend more time on it, but it's up to him. But I should make a point here. So nothing any of my companies have done has been to stifle competition. In fact, we've done the opposite. So at Tesla, we have open sourced our patents. Anyone can use our patents for free. How many companies do you know who've done that? Can you name one? I can't. At SpaceX, we don't use patents. So, I mean, she said once in a while we'll file a patent just so some patent troll doesn't cause trouble. But we're not stopping any. We've done nothing anti-competitive. We've done nothing to stop our competitors.
I'm not suggesting you are at all.
No, I just want to clarify for the audience, because some companies have done anti-competitive things. I think the strange thing, or the unusual thing about SpaceX and Tesla is that we've done things that have helped our competition. So at Tesla, we have made our supercharger system open access. We've made our charger technology available for free to the other manufacturers.
The reason
no walled garden. We could have put a wall up, but instead we invited them in.
The reason I mention this, though, is because you've had this success in the physics world, you now have these very difficult decisions that have huge impacts on the world that are not physical decisions at all. They're decisions of the mind. They're decisions that you and others have to make, and there's a question whether you should be making these decisions at all. And I think about it in the context of Starlink. Obviously, there was the report about how it's being used in Ukraine and the Russia war. There's questions about Taiwan, whether Taiwan should use it or will use it. I believe they're not right now because they're worried that at some point maybe the Chinese will tell you that you have to, they have leverage over you and you're going to have to turn that off, right? I mean, these are very difficult decisions, and I'm so curious how you think about that. And not just the decisions, the fact that you have that power.
I think it's important for the audience to understand that the reason I have these powers is not because of some anti-competitive actions. It's simply because we've executed very well.
Oh, I'm not dismissing that. I think there are so many people, by the way, who are huge supporters of what you've created.
There are other satellites out there,
But they're not as good as yours. And and we can say that maybe make the same argument out of cars and everything else. Yeah. But as a result, that gives you enormous leverage. Right?
Okay.
I mean, with the exception of by the way, these advertisers who aren't on X, in every other instance, everybody needs you.
Well, I mean, they use our product if it's better than use somebody else's product if the other product's better.
And I accept that. And maybe one day somebody else will create a better product.
Is it how is it a bad thing to make better products than other companies?
Well, and I want to just go back to the Starlink piece of it, though, because that has sort of a geopolitical ramification in terms of your power and how you think about that specific power, and then the power that the U.S. government might have either over you or not over you, the power the Chinese government might have over you or not over you, and how those things get used.
I mean, what are you suggesting?
I'm asking the question around this very idea of how these satellites are going to be used, whether you think that you should have control of them, whether the government should have control of them.
Do you trust the government?
Well, there's a lot of people who don't trust the government.
Exactly.
But then this goes back to the trust of you, right?
I mean, like I said, we're not the only company who has communication satellites. Our satellites are just much better than theirs. So it's not like we have a monopoly.
Right. Do you feel like anybody has
product? It's not like.
Do you feel anybody has leverage over you?
I mean, I think at the end of the day, if we make bad products that people don't want to use, then the users will vote with their resources and use something else.
Let me pivot the conversation for a second.
I mean, certainly, my company's overseen by regulators, and while since SpaceX, Starlink, Tesla are overseen by cumulatively over 100 regulators, in actually more than that, a few hundred regulators, because we're in 55 countries. If you sum up all the times that I had an argument with regulators, of hundreds of regulators over decades, it can sound really terrible, except they forgot to mention that there were 10 million regulations we complied with and only 5 that I disagreed with. But they listed all the 5. And it sounds like, wow, this guy's a real maverick. I'm like, yeah, but what about the 10 million we complied with?
Let me one related thing on this, in the leverage of countries and things over you and regulators. X is this free speech platform. You do business in China, lots of business in China. That's an important part of your business, I imagine.
Well, not SpaceX.
How do you think about the leverage that the Chinese have over you? And do they have leverage over you? And how do you feel about, some people would say, is it hypocritical for you to be doing business in China, or frankly in other countries as it relates to X and other things, that don't follow this free speech path that you have espoused?
The best that the X platform can do is adhere to the laws of any given country. Do you think there's something more we could do than that?
I think it would be very hard, but I just wonder, given the sort of strong philosophical approach that you've been vocal about, whether you say to yourself, maybe I shouldn't be doing business in that country.
Well, first of all, Starlink and SpaceX are no business in China whatsoever. Tesla has one of 4 vehicle factories in China, and China is, I don't know, a quarter of our market or something like that. And so it's a quarter of the market of one company. The same is true, by the way, of all the other car companies. They also have something on that order of a quarter of their sales in China. So if that's a problem for Tesla, it's a problem for every car company. I think one has to be careful about not conflating the various companies, because I can only do things that are within the bounds of the law. I cannot do beyond that. My aspiration is to do as much good as possible and to be as productive as possible within the bounds of what is legal. More than that, I cannot do.
I want to pivot and talk about AI for a moment. We had Jensen Huang here, who's a big fan of yours, as you know.
Yeah, Jensen's awesome.
Talked about bringing you the first box, by the way,
yes.
With Ilya, interestingly enough.
Yes.
Back in 2016, I think.
There's a video of Jensen and me unpacking the first AI computer at OpenAI.
So I'm so curious what you think of what's just happened over the past 2 weeks while you were dealing with this other series of headlines. There was a whole other series of headlines
at
OpenAI. What did you think?
Well,
you founded it. Co-founded.
Co-founded it, yeah. The whole arc of OpenAI, frankly, is a little troubling, because the reason for starting OpenAI was to create a counterweight to Google and DeepMind, which at the time had 2/3 of all AI talent and basically infinite money and compute, and there was no counterweight. It was a unipolar world. And Larry and Paige and I used to be very close friends, and I would stay at his house, and I would talk to Larry into the late hours of the night about AI safety. And it became apparent to me that Larry did not care about AI safety. I think perhaps the thing that gave it away was when he called me a speciesist for being pro-humanity. As in, like a racist, right, but for species. So I'm like, wait a second, what side are you on, Larry? And then I'm like, okay, listen, this guy's calling me a speciesist. He doesn't care about AI safety. We've got to have some counterpoint here because this seems like we could be, this is no good. So OpenAI was actually started, and it was meant to be open source. I named it OpenAI after open source. It is in fact closed source, super closed. It should be renamed super closed source for maximum profit AI. So because this is what it actually is. I mean, Faye loves irony. I mean, in fact, a friend of mine has this, says like the way to predict outcomes is the most ironic outcome is the most, it's like this Occam's razor, like the simplest sort of explanation is most likely. And my friend Jonah's view is that the most ironic outcome is the most likely. And that's what's happened with OpenAI. It's gone from an open source foundation, a 501c3, to suddenly it's like a $90 billion for-profit corporation with closed source. So I don't know how you go from here to there, but that seems like I don't know how you get, I don't know, is this legal? I'm like, that's legal?
So as you